Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. The Southport attack inquiry has heard how children fought like hell to escape Axel Rudakabana. Hamas has confirmed it will release 10 hostages as part of a proposed Gaza ceasefire, but warns of continuing obstacles to a deal. And Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron have agreed the need for a new deterrent to deter small boat crossings in the Channel. Well, hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see then what's making the headlines with the political commentator Adam Bolton and the Daily Mirror columnist Kevin Maguire. Try and say it. Welcome to both of you. Lovely to see you. So to the front pages then. Let's kick off with the Times. It leads on the news that the UK is on the brink of a deal that would initially see around 50 small boat arrivals returned to France each week. The Guardian adds that the talks over a migration deal were deadlocked, with negotiators haggling over how much Britain would pay towards the cost of policing small boat crossings. The Sun also features that story on their front page. It's not impressed, describing the plans as a kick in the galls.
Painful stuff.
Benefits pay more than being in work. That is the headline on the front of the Daily Telegraph, which reports that people on sickness benefits will soon receive £2,500 more a year than a worker on the minimum wage. The Daily Mail also covering that story. It adds that Tory leader Kemi Badenoch is set to warn tomorrow that the UK is becoming a welfare state with an economy attached. Meanwhile, the Eye reports that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is expected to target new taxes and revenues aimed at the wealthy. The Daily Express reports on the fury over doctors announcing a 5-day strike at the end of the month after rejecting Wes Streeting's offer to improve working conditions. The Metro carries news of the sacking of Red Bull Formula One team principal Christian Horner, 17 months after sexting allegations. He was cleared of wrongdoing after an investigation into that. That's also featuring on the front of the Daily Star, the headline, Red Bull gives you the boot. The Financial Times reports that Nvidia has beaten Apple to become the world's first public company to reach $4 trillion in market value. So, to Adam and Kevin, and let's kick off with the bilateral talks tomorrow. The state visit continues. And Adam, now down to the nitty-gritty, which is largely focused for the newspapers on migration and the small boat crossings.
That's right. The Guardian is looking at the picture in the whole and is saying that they haven't agreed yet on how much more that the UK should give to the French to police the beaches. Incidentally, statistics come out quite interesting that although the French police have been more aggressive, we've seen them puncturing boats and things like that, actually there's been a drop in the number of attempted sailings that they've tried to stop, that they've only stopped about 30% with their new aggressive tactics, whereas reportedly their previous tactics were stopping about 40% of boat launches. But this also reflects the fact that there's been a shift in tactics by the smugglers, that they now have bigger boats out in the water rather than smaller boats being pushed out off the beaches. Anyway, that's what The Guardian's saying. The Times is saying that there has been a deal done, which is this 50 migrants a week will be set back to France. It's not quite that the number of migrants coming to this country will be going down by 50, because this is a one-in, one-out process. And the idea is that for every migrant who shouldn't be here, who's taken back by France, a migrant asylum seeker in France who has reasons to come to the UK, such as a family already here, will be allowed in. So those people who are simply saying there are too many people coming in, I mean, this actually is neutral. It doesn't change that.
Except the papers are doing the maths, and I know this is like a pilot scheme, saying effectively the 50 a week is equivalent to 2,600 a year. So it's actually 17 in, 1 out. And that's why it's not enough, which is why you get front pages, like The Sun.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that's true. Yeah. The number of people being removed is only 1 in 17, but actually the people being removed are being replaced by legitimate asylum seekers.
So it's no gain to the UK, is what they're
Well, the
saying.
idea is clearly that if this system got up and running properly, the idea is that, there would be no point in people risking their lives and getting into boats because there would be a legal channel for proper asylum seekers to come into this country.
And a route back, which is the critical bit as well. Yeah,
it was the case. I don't know. I don't know if it still is. This month, that a majority of the people who came across on small boats, once they had their cases assessed, were found to have a legal right to stay as asylum seekers, and often because of those family ties. So it's one, given the safe and legal route in to those people who are now paying the people smugglers and fueling that trade. And then the second is the deterrent for those who wouldn't be deemed entitled to stay here, and they would go back. Now, 50 a week, I can get why papers do 50 a week, because it's all about how few it is, rather than doing 2,600 a year, which is still a relatively small number of 40,000. However...
44,000, I think it was last, since the election.
Well, that's... you can take that, but of course it's got various periods. But that's still, that 2,600 is still considerably more than Rwanda, which is only going to be a few hundred.
So that takes us to the deterrent.
So if you're a deterrent, 700 million on Rwanda and only 4 volunteers took trips there, was only a few hundred going to go. So there was a deterrent, and the deterrent effect was always argued you might be selected as one of the several hundred who would go to Rwanda, and that'll be a deterrent. This surely, if you're going to be sent back after paying your £1,500, £2,000, whatever it is to go on a boat, this would be a bigger deterrent because there are more people being returned.
So the whole idea of the deterrent, which was rejected, Labour firmly rejected Rwanda, threw it out straight away, all gone. And yet we look at the deterrents we now see in America, with the ICE agents rounding people up where they think they might be working, people being shipped to a disgusting-looking prison in El Salvador, for example. Has the nature of what a deterrent is now changed as people battle illegal migration, do you think?
Well, I think not as far as Europeans, including Britain, are concerned. The whole message of the Entente Cordiale and the speeches that we've heard this week from President Macron, who's on the front page of The Sun, is that the Europeans are not Donald Trump, that they believe in the rule of law and they believe in respecting international conventions.
Yeah, but what do voters believe in? And that's the crunch we're going to come to, isn't it, ultimately?
I think most voters believe in the rule of law. There's a very noisy right-wing...
Which means what in this debate, quite frankly? That those people shouldn't be coming? Or that you need to...
No, which is that you have to do things like this, is to process this, and you have to give people a legal route who are genuine asylum seekers. You accept the principle of asylum. Whereas in America, not only are they not accepting the principle of asylum, in spite of international obligations, they're actually booting out people who've got there perfectly legitimately and sending them to prison. So there is not an appetite in this country to go that far.
No, right. Irregular or unlawful, if you want to call them that way, crossings. The most effective policy I can think of in recent years was Rishi Sunak's deal with Albania to return people. They were coming across, 10,000 or so, coming across, claiming asylum. Well, albeit it is a NATO country, it's not an authoritarian state. Did the deal, and that was it. People were going back, and then they stopped coming that way.
And the government is claiming, they acknowledge that there are record numbers coming in, but they also say that actually deportations are at a record rate, much greater than they were under the last Conservative government.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll have lots of coverage, no doubt, about this bilateral. Security is also there, defence as well. So there's other bigger things to talk about. They've done a deal tonight for Storm Shadow, I think, haven't they? Amidst the Americans now starting to re-arm Ukraine, having halted it.
I mean, it has to be said, one of the interesting things about this is that France is doing bilateral deals with the UK.
Yeah.
And certainly after Brexit, the message was nation to nation, we're not interested. Has to be, you have to negotiate with the whole bloc, the EU, rather than with France as a nation. But, France is a proud nation. And indeed, some of what they're agreeing with the UK is upsetting European Union partners.
Spain, Italy, Malta...
Because
Cyprus,
people will be going back and they say, well, if you accept the principle that you can send people back from one European country to another, then the point of entry is, generally speaking, not Spain and not France. So it would go back to other countries.
But we've moved on from Liz Truss saying she couldn't decide whether Macron and France were friend or foe. And I think it shows the hard yards that Starmer gets a lot wrong, but you've got to, some things are right. The hard yards you do on those personal relationships, the political relationships, can pay off to some extent.
Although the son can't resist a pun.
No, I know.
Which is fair enough, actually. But,
No, my friend Emmanuel, I heard quite a lot, I have to be honest with you. Shall we move on to money and what the government's going to do about it? Right, first of all, benefits. The Telegraph and the Mail both suggesting that the maths now show, after the welfare was thrown out, welfare changes were thrown out, that benefits do pay more than being in work. To be fair, if you get nearly every benefit,
if you're sick,
get more than the... Exactly.
You've got to be sick. If you're unemployed, it wouldn't be the case. But if you're sick... No, it's the Centre for Social Justice was set up by Ian Duncan Smith, former Conservative Work and Pension Secretary. He imposed a lot of cuts himself when he was there, saying... Compared to being on the minimum wage, it's not a living wage; it's a minimum wage. It's £12.21 an hour if you're 21 or over. If you're sick and are entitled to personal independence payments, I suspect they've gone for the full 180 quid. I haven't seen the breakdown of the calculation. 180 quid a week rather than some people only get 30 quid on PIP, and you're getting housing benefit and other payments. You'll be 2,500 better off than somebody on the minimum wage.
The annual total, the average 22,500, and you could get up to 25,000
if you're sick.
If you're sick.
But this hasn't happened under Labour. This has been going on under the Conservatives. But what do we want?
Said it did. The point they're saying is it's unsustainable.
But what do we want to pay people who are sick? I mean, how poor do we want people to be sick? I mean, low pay is a big problem. It scars Britain. Work often doesn't pay because 12.21 is not a huge amount. It might have gone up 6.7% recently, but it is still below the real living wage, which is considered to be...
What is the Telegraph and the Daily Mail trying to do or say?
Well, they're trying to say that under Labour there is a system whereby if people play the system, they're better off not working.
That's the same system as under the Tories.
Yeah, it's
I mean, they put it as Labour. I mean, that's just that they're playing politics with it.
It is the same
party
system,
politics.
Although
with
it does relate to last week's U-turns for the reason that people going sick, particularly those people who are going sick for mental health reasons, are in a dramatic increase. And this is an issue which, for whatever reason, the government has chosen not to address head-on. That's the truth.
Well, I suppose it's nudge, nudge, wink, wink. People are on the fiddle, making it up, pretending they're ill when they're not. That's what they're trying to say. But this was happening under the Conservatives. It's not under Labour. Right, it's under Labour now, but Labour's not created. Well, the number of claimants is. Yeah. But what do you want to do? Do you want people who are sick to be in abject poverty, or do you want to increase the minimum wage so people in work are paid more than people who are sick?
And are either of those affordable?
I'd rather go for the higher minimum wage.
Is the problem? Well, that itself is not affordable either, is it? If you take a look at the eye, we know there's a squeeze. The headroom is practically non-existent. We know they've boxed themselves into the smallest fiscal space you could possibly imagine. So what do they do, tampering around the edges, if they're not going to do wealth taxes? What are they going to do?
You say a higher minimum wage isn't affordable. People who are on the minimum wage are entitled to universal credit and housing benefit and so on. So we are subsidising low pay as taxpayers. If you want to cut the welfare bill, one of the ways to do it is to increase the minimum wage, which George Osborne, when he was Chancellor,
That's certainly true. Well, this eye story really comes out of Prime Minister's questions today, where Kemi Badenoch had one of her better outings because, first of all, she said to...
In fact, the last 2 weeks,
she said to... Well, last week, of course, was taken over by Rachel Reeves' distress. But this week, she first of all said, are you going to break your pledge to increase VAT, the income tax rates, and... also employees' national insurance. Yeah. And, of course, Keir Starmer said no. So then she said, well, what about a wealth tax? What about thresholds of income tax? And there he fudged. He didn't give a straight answer. So people have drawn the obvious conclusion for that possibly he might consider a wealth tax, although he did say he didn't think it was a good idea. But certainly everyone expects now that the extension of the freezing thresholds will carry on.
Which drags more people into tax if they get a pay rise, for example, which is called fiscal drag.
People will get an inflation-linked pay rise at the very least.
So more people end up paying...
paying higher rates of tax.
And Jeremy Hunt had it all planned ahead if the Conservatives had won the general election and he was Chancellor. But Rachel Reeves said she'd end it in 28-29, of course, which would have just been the year likely before the general election. But of course, it costs billions. You lose billions in pay, it brings in billions, whichever way you want to look at it. But it looks like that will be postponed.
Yeah, it's all fascinating, and we've got whole months of speculating, haven't we? That's the thing.
Yes.
Long may we continue.
Coming up, we stay with politics, though, because a former Conservative chairman has defected to Reform. Are the Tories on the ropes, it says here? We'll be back in a moment.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok. We've been undercover inside Asia's huge network of scam centres.
This compound is, without a doubt, the worst. It is essentially hell on earth.
We cover a vast, varied and dynamic region that's shaping the rest of the world.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that. Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me again, Adam Bolton and Kevin Maguire. A late breaker making the front page of The Sun, has to be said. Ex-Tory chief joins Farage. This is Sir Jake Berry, who's fairly well known, to be fair, Kevin.
He is. I think he was chair during the Trust period. He's no longer an MP because he lost his seat, but he's defected now. It can't just be dismissed by the Conservatives. They'll be worried about this. They'll be worried about others going. David Jones, former cabinet minister, went. The Labour attack, of course, will be vote reform, get the Tories, get the same old Tories, the people who are in created the mess. But nevertheless, you can see on the right at the moment, there's been a realignment on the British right. It's going reforms where?
Just had a statement from the Conservative Party, their spokesperson on this. We wish Jake well in his new high-spend, high-tax party. Reform support increasing the benefits bill by removing the two-child cap and nationalising British industry. By contrast, the Conservatives, under new leadership, will keep making the case for sound money, lower taxes and bringing the welfare bill under control. Anyway, that's their response.
One could argue they're advertising reforms policies. But Sir Jake Berry, or rather Sir James Berry, to get it correctly, is a prominent figure. He's quite young, very media friendly. He's done a lot of work on the media. His old constituency was Rossendale and Darwin, which is an interesting one because it's flipped between Labour and Conservatives a number of times. Janet Anderson, remember her? She used to be the Labour minister, in fact, from Rossendale. Then it went to Jake Berry. Now it's gone back to Labour. And, I mean, I think all of this is just a sign that ambitious right-of-centre politicians are wondering, is my future best served in sticking with the Conservatives, or do things look better for reform? Is that the best way that they can get back into politics, which, of course, is what they all want to do? And you know, we're talking about this. You look at the opinion polls, Conservatives can't win on their own. Reform can't win on their own. So however much they deny it and slag each other off, as you've just read out, the electoral logic, if reform carries on as strong as it is for some kind of deal at the next general election.
I mean, Starmer and Labour do see reform as a threat, not the Conservative Party at the moment. The momentum is with Farage and reform. And Jake Berry is a northern Tory.
Which is why the migration bilateral tomorrow with France becomes so critical.
And also one suspects that reform will have bitten his hand off when he said, I want to come across, because, let's face it, they are short of serious talent.
Yeah, a little bit shorter after the revelations of an
They've
MP
lost two
and
of the
COVID
five
loans.
that got voted in at the last election. Just very quickly, let's do the Red Bull F1 team losing its principal, although you wouldn't know because it's mainly about his wife. Isn't it, on the front page?
Christian Horner would not be on the front if it wasn't for Jerry Halliwell. It's kind of the shout used to go up in newspaper newsrooms, get the wife, when a big boss resigns.
And the son as well, even more so as well. Tears as Red Bull axed Jerry's hubby. You know, I mean, it's unbelievable,
I mean, younger viewers may not know who either of them are.
Red Bull gives you the boot, but at least they've got him on the front. But,
she used to be called Ginger Spice, and she's now... she now doesn't like being called by...
bit of dad dancing here, Adam.
Ginger Spice or whatever.
Adam, Kevin, we've run out of time. Thank you both very much indeed. We will see you for more a little later. Thank you.
Turkey is burying its dead. Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets. Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
It is 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended press preview. Our top story. Harrowing testimony at the Southport attack inquiry as parents say their children fought like hell to escape. Libromances rekindle, but will the UK and France really be able to agree a deal to tackle cross-channel migration? Plus, Hamas confirms it will release 10 hostages as part of a proposed Gaza ceasefire, but warns of continuing obstacles to a deal. Damning criticism of how victims of the infected blood scandal are still facing delays to compensation.
It's turned into another horror story, a scandal in a scandal.
An emphatic English victory keeps the Lionesses at the Euros. Well, over the next hour, we will be discussing today's news with art reviewers Adam Bolton and Kevin Maguire. And later, we'll have a full run-through of tomorrow's front pages. Hello there, good evening. We begin with the harrowing and at times heartbreaking testimony given today by families affected by the Southport terror attack. The mother of a young girl who survived the ordeal told an inquiry of how her daughter had fought like hell to escape. Other parents described the life-changing physical and emotional scars that their children now bear. Axel Rudikabana murdered 3 girls and attempted to kill 10 other people, including 8 children, in July of last year. Well, over the next hour, we will bring you tonight's headlines, tomorrow's front pages, and the views of our paper reviewers, the political commentator Adam Bolton and the Daily Mirror columnist Kevin Maguire. But first, our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, has this report and a warning that it does contain distressing details.
The terrifying, awful reality of what children experienced that day in Southport last summer played out in front of the inquiry into whether that attack could have been prevented. A father told how his daughter was stabbed in the back 3 times by a coward she didn't even see. She has no self-pity about what happened to her, he said. She wears her scars with a dignity and defiance that is remarkable. We couldn't be prouder of her. She is our hero. 3 girls didn't survive, of course, and we know the authorities have been aware of Axel Rudikabana. The father said lessons need to be learned from what happened and processes need to be changed if organisations and people need to be held to account for what culminated in that awful day. Then we trust that this inquiry team will do that. The inquiry then heard from the mother of a girl who was stabbed 33 times, lost her entire blood volume and required 2 life-saving operations. She struggles to understand how she survived, she says. She's grieving for children she didn't know before. She described seeing the CCTV footage of her daughter being pulled back into the studio by the attacker to be stabbed 20 more times before she escaped for a second time. She's much more than that moment on CCTV, she said. It carries her courage and determination to survive. She fought like hell to get herself out of that building twice, she said. Most painful of all is that those children had to fight for their own lives. She tries to understand how someone could do this to children. It's been a living nightmare to support her through her thoughts and feelings of the person that did this. Some days she's able to hold so much empathy and space for what he perhaps was feeling or went through, what his life may have been like to do this. Did he have friends? Were people not kind to him, she asks me, confused. Could he not talk to his parents if he had big feelings? Why did no one help him? How did he get the knife? Did his parents know? Why didn't he get stopped? It is the key question in this inquiry. It will hear from more families when it resumes in September. Greg Milam, Sky News, Liverpool.
Well, certainly the Daily Mirror leading on this astonishing bravery of Southport children. That is the headline on the front page of the Daily Mirror. And the coverage continues inside too. They report on the inquiry and the testimonies of people who survived the attack. Kevin, full coverage of truly horrific testimony today and the pain and anguish of this awful, awful day in Southport.
No, absolutely. And it's, you read it, you hear about it, you remember it, and it is, and this is from a distance, and it is absolutely horrific and heartbreaking. But then the stories are also inspiring of how some of these young people dealt with it, and you read this account today we get from the mum of a child known as C1 because they're entitled to anonymity. We know BB, Elsie Dot and Alice were
who we see
were murdered.
Yeah.
But of course others suffered terrible injuries, including this girl who stabbed 33 times. And her mother tells how her daughter remembers the sound the knife made. And you read little details like that, and it's utterly chilling. And how families cope and how the survivors cope is kind of almost beyond me, but people do, because the human spirit is so indomitable. I just hope they all get the absolute support they need to overcome.
I've got to say, this story is not on the front pages of the other newspapers, and this is classic Daily Mirror coverage of an important story, finding in all the sadness a slightly, as you say, slightly uplifting message about the bravery of these children, and giving the parents an opportunity to remember their children or to praise their children who survived this. And actually, you know, just looking at it, it's thousands of words. I mean, in the Mirror, it's almost what the broadsheet newspapers would call a long read.
Yeah.
And it really does go back. I mean, a lot of criticism of the Daily Mirror under its ownership and all that, but this is the heart of the Mirror, isn't it?
It is, in the heart of Britain. You read the mother's account, and it's incredibly engaging, it's incredibly compelling, and you begin to get a greater understanding. But it is where you feel conflicted, because you think this is absolutely awful, but then isn't this incredible how the daughter responded, trying to protect others, how they deal with it now, afterwards. And she says her daughter feels guilty the girls died who she didn't know. You go through all that, and it's an insight. And I think it's important in an inquiry that survivors have their say and are heard.
Before very early. I mean, it's day 2, isn't it? That's the point. It's very early to remember the victims of this.
Another thing that's interesting is these barristers and judges who are chairing these inquiries. In this case, it's Sir Adrian Fulford, but we've also had the Blood inquiry, the Post Office inquiry, and the Grenfell Tower inquiry. And they really do seem to get the mood right and get and understand what people want from these inquiries.
That's true, actually. They're impressive public servants. They're proving so. You know, they are representing the public.
OK, well, we'll certainly keep an eye on that inquiry. Only the second day, and full coverage from your paper, the Daily Mirror. Let's move on, though, shall we? And Le Bromance may have been in the air today as the French president continued his state visit to the UK, but it is far from clear if he will agree a new deal with the Prime Minister over cross-channel migrants. Emmanuel Macron and Sir Keir Starmer embraced as they reaffirmed their partnership, but they've yet to get down to the negotiations on how to stop the boats. Our political correspondent, Rob Powell, has this.
Eager for images of a firm friendship, but this visit about more than the usual photo call. In the British Museum, history all around, but the battles of the past now long forgotten.
In this new world, our alliances are, in my view, more important than ever. The strength and solidarity of countries that share the same values, the same aims, the same hope for the future.
The French president pulling the UK close.
We are totally committed to this work in common, hand in hand, to be sure that the United Kingdom and France will put their energy to build, let's say, a better place, a better world.
Back in Downing Street, some pomp, but policy too.
Will you do a deal on migration, Mr. President?
Sir Keir Starmer could really do with some progress on illegal migration during this state visit, given small boat crossings are at record highs. But there's plenty of politics on the French side too, with Emmanuel Macron wanting the UK to do more to tackle some of the pull factors that bring migrants to the French coast in the first place.
So beyond the wide smiles and warm words,
I feel that this relationship is as strong as it's ever been between our countries.
Discussions on a one-in, one-out migrant returns deal appear more fraught, the French president balancing this relationship with his other EU commitments.
What I think the Spanish and the Italians and others are saying to the French is, don't forget, this is not simply a matter between you and the UK. There's a wider European bunch of issues here, which are regularly discussed, of course, within the EU and between individual countries.
More likely is an announcement on new police tactics that would mean French officers intercepting overloaded boats while they're in shallow water, like this one filmed to the south of Calais last week. But Emmanuel Macron knows his opposite number wants more, the Prime Minister trying to squeeze political benefit from this personal relationship. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
Let's take a look. Kevin, I know you're having a lovely time, but let's rewind.
We're talking about pubs.
You're talking about pubs. There's a story about pub closures. We will come on to that later. In the meantime, let's take a look at how the newspapers are covering this. It's the lead story on The Times, with the paper saying the UK is on the brink of a deal that would initially see around 50 small boat arrivals return to France each week. The Guardian adds that the talks over a migration deal were deadlocked, with negotiators haggling over how much Britain would pay towards the cost of policing small boat crossings. Meantime, Starmer-Macron bromance isn't dead. That's the headline on the Daily Mirror's page 6. The paper adds that the deepening of Macron and Starmer's friendship has led to the new cooperation over a new migration deal. It's a while since I've had to tell you off, isn't it?
I know, yeah.
I've got my old voice coming back. Fantastic. Anyway.
All right, sorry, miss.
I used to get told you sound like a headmistress. I'm like, yeah, you would too. Anyway, let's take a look at the Sun if we've got it, shall we? Kicking the goals. Right, so this is the big bilateral tomorrow. They're meeting in the morning. This is the nitty-gritty. Why is it a kick in the goals is kind of my question.
Well, it has to be said, the Sun has a history of mocking the French or seeing them as the old enemy. You remember up yours, Delors, to the European Commissioner. And yesterday in the Sun, their star political writer, Harry Cole, had a good old go at the French and saying they're our worst allies, they've never helped us. So this is of a piece. But, I mean, the point is that France has agreed, as they say, to take just 50 migrants a week back. Now, that does add up to nearly 2,000 in the course of a year. But it's a gesture bearing in mind that, you know, maybe 40, 50,000 people are going to come in the boats each year, and also bearing in mind that this is a one-in, one-out deal whereby people who shouldn't be here, shouldn't have come here, will be removed, but people who have a legitimate claim to asylum, perhaps a family connection, will be processed in France, and there'll basically be a swap in terms of numbers.
So it allows a mechanism to come to the UK, but also allows a mechanism to return, which we lost because of Brexit under the Dublin Accord, Dublin Agreement.
The Dublin Accord, where but chatting to Amber Rudd, who was the Home Secretary, and talked back then. She talked about hundreds being returned, but there weren't the people coming over in boats in the same way. So those who are returned would be the deterrent, which is what Rwanda was supposed to be, although it's, what, 50,
so the
50 a week.
So the mechanism of a return is the new deterrent they talked about.
50 a week, it's 2,600 a year, although the government is saying it's an initial figure which would increase if the system worked. But Rwanda was only several hundred.
And some people are saying...
A few hundred. So that would be actually, if you believe in a deterrent, the bigger deterrent, well, is the odds of you going back are much greater under this. They would be going.
And some people are saying, well, they'll just be taken to France and then they can
come back again.
Try their luck again.
Yeah.
But what they're saying,
and
is
also if you can find them. I mean, isn't that the point?
Is part of this that there will be biometric testing of people who are sent back, so that they can be tested immediately if they come in, and they'll then immediately be sent back again.
Yeah. The Times going with the same. 50 migrants a week will be sent back to France. The one-in, one-out deal. Papers are saying it's 17 in, one out, but, you know, that's the 2,600 divided by 44,000 that are in, presumably.
It is a small proportion.
Yeah.
The biggest success...
Is it a pilot scheme? Is that how it should be properly described?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, so that's a start. And then The Guardian, Anglo-French migration deal hangs in the balance, suggesting there's legal issues and there's cost implications too as well, which is always the way. We remember the Daily Mail front page, give us back our 770 million, which was Chris Philp, I think, wasn't it? So we've already paid the French a lot, is how some people see it.
Yeah, I think the Guardian story is more cautious than the Times or the Sun, or actually the detail inside the Mirror, which is all around that figure of 50. We'll discover tomorrow whether the caution was correct or whether it was a mistake.
But that is because, you know, there's a wider issue of how this is all policed by the French, who we have been paying, how much they want in order to be possibly more effective in terms of stopping the boats. There's going to have to be some kind of processing for a safe way to come to the United Kingdom, presumably established in France. And whatever is agreed by President Macron, he's got to square it both with the French people and the French Parliament, but also with his other European partners who are not that keen on this, frankly.
So if we take a look at the inside then of the Mirror, Starmer and Macron, the bromance isn't dead. Why is the bromance so important? And secondly, is he going a bit rogue, really, with trying to agree this deal, do you think, compared to, you know, how he should negotiate it with the European Union?
Well, he is in the sense that this is a bilateral deal.
Yes.
And, you know, if you remember after Brexit, as indeed we saw with trade negotiations, it was you can't do bilateral deals, you have to deal with the whole bloc. But
it is our border, isn't it? Obviously,
yeah, but what we're seeing here is Macron very happy with talking about the Entente Cordiale and Franco-British relations. And that, I think, too, is a message that Sir Keir Starmer will be pleased to get out because, you know, there are many people, you know, half the country didn't vote for Brexit, and they're probably quite happy to see warmer relations practical relations re-established with France.
And how important is this issue of the boats, given the context of the polling on reform, which no doubt we'll come on to a bit later? There's been another significant defection tonight. So how important is it for Labour to look like they're achieving something?
Yeah, Farage and Reform have almost just ignored Brexit, the European Union. Now they've just gone straight to migration, which was the basis of their campaign in the first place. No, it's one of the big issues now. So it's a lot along cost of living standards, public services, particularly the NHS, and migration, including, or often particularly, irregular, illegal, however you want to describe it, people coming over in boats, despite the numbers coming in boats being a very small proportion of the net increase in migration. So no, it's a big issue. It's just how you tackle it. Do you fight it all on Reform's territory, which you're probably then going to lose to them, or do you approach it in a broader way? I mean, we're not going to get any more Islander stranger speeches from the Prime Minister. After he accepted, he got that very wrong.
And there is a lot of hypocrisy about this, because certainly what they will say, and what the opposition parties will say is, well, one in, one out means there's no net reduction. But the truth of the matter is that the Conservatives certainly know that migration is not going to, you know, it's impossible to see it actually grinding to a halt immediately, although it is possible that you can see circumstances where, you know, the boats could be stopped.
And just one final thought on this. First European head of state to come for a state visit since Brexit. Has it been a resounding success, do you think? Is everyone, you know...
Well, the optics... I'm a little sceptical about all these. It's almost a dry run for Trump, likely, in September. Another bromance. So Starmer likes his bromances.
But
it's sort of yes and no, isn't it? I mean, I was happy to see that tapestry in Bayeux. I suppose it'll be a lot easier for some people just to come to London now.
And we haven't even mentioned that, have we?
Yeah, but also the truth is that if you're talking about European leaders to come on a state visit, that Macron is the big one, because, you know, otherwise you have the bicycling monarchies of you know, the heads of state in Scandinavia, or you have, you know, nameless rubber-stamping presidents, you know,
Who are we talking about here?
No, but namely the president of Germany or Italy.
No, is the preeminent... Macron is the preeminent leader now in the European in the Union.
You're right. That's very interesting, isn't it? President versus Prime Ministers. Yeah. Didn't think about it like that, I have to say. Anyway, lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, including we will take a look at how the newspapers are covering the infected blood inquiry. Blood scandal victims still harmed by the delays, the headline inside the Metro.